So today we're finally going to talk about something that a lot of you guys have been asking me to talk about, and it of course involves Sega, because I'm the king of Sega YouTube. Now, Sega is one of my favorite companies of all time. I love the Genesis, love the Saturn, love the Dreamcast, but when it comes to like modern stuff for Sega games and releases and stuff like that, you only really see love for the Sega Genesis. There's a million Sega Genesis clone systems. Of course, Mega SG was a thing. That was the FPGA Genesis from Analog. Great system, but of course that disgusting limited run and limited availability just makes me turn my nose to Analog. You of course have gotten compilations on things like the Nintendo Switch, your PlayStation, even Sega Genesis is on Nintendo Switch Online. But beyond that, we just kind of pretend that the Saturn and the Dreamcast and really the SG-1000 by extension, they just don't exist. You know, they don't exist in Sega's world, and we never really see re-releases of these games or compilations of these games. But now it seems like there's a new product that is potentially trying to hit the market called Super Sega, which will play pretty much everything from the SG-1000 to the Dreamcast in an FPGA format. Now, they actually sent me an email about this a couple of weeks ago. I took a look at the email and I didn't really think much of it because it seemed more like a pipe dream than anything that would actually become a reality. But since then, there's been a lot of updates, including an update that just happened yesterday that kind of make me believe maybe there's something a bit more to this. So I want to talk about this system, talk about what it does, share my thoughts on it, and then share my concerns on it as well, because on paper, it sounds absolutely awesome. So we're going to start things off with an article that was done by Time Extension, which is a subsidiary, I believe, of Nintendo Life. This is done by Damien. Basically an interview that was done with the people behind the Super Sega, which is the FPGA system that they are planning to release. Now, of course, Super Sega, that name is gonna, you know, potentially raise some red flags, especially with Sega themselves. There's nothing wrong with making an FPGA system, as we saw with the Mega SG, but using the Sega name might cause some red flags to pop up. However, I believe if it's stylized like this, you know, maybe they'll be able to get away with it. And they've actually reached out to Sega, which is a bad move, but they reached out to Sega to try to work on this kind of together and see if they want to put their stamp on it. So I'm not going to read the whole article. I'll have a link to it in the description box down below. Here is the person who is the lead engineer. He looks kind of cool. You know, I like this little car, this little race car thing he's in. That's pretty badass. But here is the design of the system. And the design is kind of ugly. Like, let's just call it what it is. The design of the system, like, this is kind of ugly, but it's more about functionality to me than practicality. And essentially what this system is trying to do is be able to play, you know, physical games from the SG-1000 to the Genesis Master System as well. It also wants to do Saturn, you know, Dreamcast. Like, it wants to do a lot of things. When it comes to the 32X, they say here, we're pleased to report that the two omissions from the original spec list, Sega 32X and CD, will be playable on the Super Sega. However, the former will require the use of a 32X itself. And that's kind of a red flag to me as well, because it's like, well, if this is an FPGA system, why can't you just make an FPGA core for the system? Because something like a Saturn FPGA core, something like a Dreamcast FPGA core, these are all sort of new things. These aren't things that are available. You know, you have to build these from the ground up. As far as I'm aware, I haven't heard of an FPGA core, especially at least for the Dreamcast, that's actually functional. So kind of when you see like these mock-up designs and stuff like that, you kind of get a little bit leery about it. And that's why initially, at first, I kind of wrote it off. And you can see here, we recently contacted a few people at Sega regarding licenses. It would be great if the console could ship with some ROMs inside, licensed by Sega, of course. I think users will welcome the chance to pay a little bit more if it means the inclusion of some great Sega classics. We are waiting on a reply from Sega, and we will see. Now, like, yes and no, like, maybe that would happen, maybe it wouldn't happen. They want to ship it at $400 to $450 price point, which, you know, honestly, that's not terrible considering all the stuff that it can do, allegedly. Because a lot of this comes down to what this system can allegedly do as far as playing games, right? Well, they've actually have a YouTube channel as well. And over on their YouTube channel, they uploaded a couple of videos showcasing potentially what the system is going to be in action. Now, when you first watch these videos, you see that it has a very sort of archaic infrastructure. You know, there's not a whole lot of stuff in terms of like the theme of the system. You know, it looks very bare bones. I do hope that that is something that is addressed, because I think at a premium price point of, you know, a $400 system, you need to have a better menu system, something that's a lot more attractive. But they did show some FPGA cores actually running games. They start out with Saturn Bomberman. Now, when you listen to the audio in Saturn Bomberman, it definitely does not sound perfect. There's obviously some work to be done with that, but still, like, it is running. You know, it is somewhat functional, and obviously something that can be improved upon as well. Then they show off Shinobi on the Sega Master System, which, I mean, Master System stuff, you know, that's inherently cool. Everyone likes Master System because you got Game Gear games essentially on the big screen with that, and Shinobi looks like it's running and playing fine. And in this specific trailer, they actually wrap things up with Golden Axe, which of course is a Sega Genesis game, and once again, everything seems functional with this. It's not 100% perfect. The sound sounds a little bit blown out to me. It doesn't sound quite as good, which is kind of a subjective thing, as it would on the Sega Genesis, but it's definitely you know, progress. And that's something that's very important with this, is how everything is progressing. But like I said, something very recently, as of yesterday, happened with this system, where they actually showed off the FPGA core for the Dreamcast, which was something that a lot of people had questions about, you know, happening with this. And they had said previously, like in this interview that we just read, that they had some Dreamcast games up and running, but they decided to actually show it with Crazy Taxi. Now, of course, Crazy Taxi was a launch game for the Sega Dreamcast, a huge arcade hit. And honestly, it seems like it's running pretty decently, like, all things considered. Like, this is definitely a little bit more impressive than I would have thought they would have, you know, progress-wise when it comes to an FPGA core for the Sega Dreamcast. Like, it doesn't seem like there's many graphical issues or anything like that. The audio is pretty much spot on. Yeah, there's a little bit of slowdown here and there, but once again, you know, we're assuming that this is all sort of at a very baseline stage with the Super Sega. So if they're able to get these sorts of results in this intermittent period, like, I think the sky is potentially the limit of how good this system could actually be. But then, of course, we have so many questions with the Super Sega. We, of course, have the question of, is all of this real? You know, are these videos that we're seeing actually running on the Super Sega FPGA cores, or are they just using emulation to sort of simulate that? Now, I'm not sitting here saying that there's any proof of that. It's just sort of a question that I have in the back of my mind, just because of the fact that they got this FPGA core for the Dreamcast to look so decently, like, when this doesn't seem to exist in any other sort of space. And all these, you know, people that have been making things like FPGA cores have never been able to really work out the Sega Dreamcast, yet these individuals have started it out pretty quickly, all things considered. Of course, you have, is Sega going to allow this to come out, or are they going to have an interjection in this and potentially make them change the name? I really don't think that Sega themselves is just going to be like, yeah, we want to be a part of this, because they don't really acknowledge their history quite like a lot of us would like for them to acknowledge their history, unless it's sort of Sega Genesis related. So I don't really see Sega signing off on this. But even if Sega did sign off on it, there would be a bit of a higher price point of entry, because now you have licensing stuff to worry about. Of course, those games aren't going to come for free, whatever games you're wanting to hopefully have on the system. So I feel like that's sort of an area of, you know, concern as well. And I guess the biggest concern is this just going to be another flash in the pan sort of situation, where we see like a retro project that looks really cool, that sounds really cool, that sounds too good to be true, and then it ends up being too good to be true, because maybe they embellish some things. You know, they're targeting like December funding for this, if you look at their website. But what does that actually mean? Are you looking for investors? Are you going to be doing crowdfunding? Because the crowdfunding sphere right now for really anything, especially retro related stuff, is just dead. I feel nobody's wanting to give up money off the jump without seeing at the very least a working prototype, which I guess you would have to have for some of the crowdfunding places. But, you know, is that prototype indicative of a final product? Like, I can think of so many things that people gave money to in Television Amico, the Coleco Chameleon situation. You know, how many companies come along and announce something and then it just kind of falls by the wayside. The Hyperkin N64 system, which I have stories to tell you guys about that. Maybe one day I'll tell those stories about how they showcased that Hyperkin N64 that was supposedly going to be like a plug and play way to play N64 games via HDMI. I've got some stories about that, but I just have a lot of hesitancy. I have a lot of hesitancy with this product because it sounds awesome. It sounds really cool. It sounds like something that I think a lot of people would be interested in it. But the fact that, you know, there is that sort of hesitancy. The fact that, you know, why isn't there a 32X core if you're going to be doing it like this? Why would I need a 32X to plug into this behemoth of a system in order just to play games? And is this actually running on these cores that they are developing? I guess time will tell with it. Like, I'm excited, but I'm just a little bit leery towards it just because I've been around the block for a while. And sometimes when something sounds too good to be true, it ends up being too good to be true. But I will be following this project. I will be keeping an eye on it. And if we get any cool updates, like, I'll definitely let you guys know about it because I do find it very interesting at the very least, because this is something that should be happening. There should be advancements done in these, you know, different sorts of technological systems when it comes to the old systems of Sega, because it just seems like people forget about them and they're super awesome. So let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think about the Super Sega? Do you think that this is actually going to be a product that releases? Do you think this product is a reality? Or do you think that people are just shooting for the moon and, I don't know, they're just going to land on Earth and be like, hey, we overpromised and we underdelivered? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like the video, share it around as well in your Sega communities that probably don't like me anyways. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.